episode number 45. My name is Jay Oza, and my co-host is Julie Wu Finkelstein. And in this segment, segment one, we're going to discuss one aspect of part of creating a message. And this is a message that, depending on how you're using it, like Julie likes to use it for coming up with your own identity, but it also could be more outward focused on whether somebody asks you about something, whether it's what do you do, what are you working on, whatever. And rather than going into specific, you first want to get the other person excited on what you're doing. And the burden falls on you to do that. The other person doesn't, you don't know whether that person, because people ask, like you always ask, the kids figured this out, like, how are you doing? And the kids will say, good. Well, actually, I used to thought it was a stupid answer, but now more I think about it, that's actually a good answer. Because if the parents are not challenging the kids, then why should they give you more than good? If good gets it done for them, then they're done. Is the parent really interested or not? So I think the kids have figured it out, accidentally or what? Maybe they're much smarter than we think they are. So in a way, I don't think you want to say, like, a lot of times we do that where people ask you, how are you doing, and we just say good, fine, things like that. But I think there's an opportunity where you can actually, if you prepare, you can give a very little bit more than good. You can give like a one sentence, which is high level. And if the person is really interested, will ask you more questions. And it's a way for you to engage. One of the things we are not good at is, in order to get to a certain level, you got to start engaging with people. And a lot of times we don't even plan on how to engage. We just think it happens automatically. And the reality is it doesn't happen automatically. You got to work at it. Everything is work. There are no accidents. Accidents can happen, but you can make your accidents more predictable. If you can actually predict your accidents, if you can spend some time before you get out of the house and saying, if somebody asks you this question, how are you going to answer it? When you haven't planned, the answer tends to be good, fine. And I always tell my son, he's 14, that when I'm having a conversation with him, there are only two types of conversationalist. Well, one of them is not, I don't even know if you can call them a conversationalist. There are only two types of either you're a conversation ender or you're a conversation extender. And the way you answer the question, the way how you handle that one sentence, you'll find out quickly whether the other person is a conversation ender or a conversation extender. So it's very important that one sentence is well thought out. It's something you have to keep on working at, because it is difficult. Like if somebody asks me, and I keep working on it, I have a whiteboard here, and I always try different things when it comes to, like, what do I do? And one of the things that I included in this video is that I coach people win with their speeches. Now, there's a lot of stuff there that I've included there that are pretty simple. I coach. People sometimes are interested in coaching, but they may go that angle. The other one is win. Who doesn't like to win? That could get somebody interested. The third part is speeches. People have fear of public speaking. So I've given them three things that they could pick out: coach, win, speeches. If they can't pick up any one of them, then obviously that person is a conversation ender. I can't force engage. I've done everything that I can to engage. Now it's up to the other person to also reciprocate and then say, okay, I'm going to extend that. I want to know more about it. So I think it's very important that you work on one sentence, but keep it short. A lot of people squeeze too much into that one sentence. That becomes a pitch, in my opinion. So don't make one sentence a pitch. That's something that I don't think we have ever explained that closely. But a pitch is almost a permission that you have to get in order to pitch. You can't just go and say, "Hey, Julie, let me give you a pitch on what I do." I mean, she's going to say, "Get lost," okay? She's going to think this guy's weird and not, won't have a conversation with me after that. So you have to kind of have that rhythm, the cadence on how to engage with people. And the message hack was sort of our way, but a lot of these nuances we are kind of discussing, because when you do it, you realize that it's not that simple. You need to develop that cadence, and a lot of it you'll develop it once you get it, but you do have to put in the time to do that. So Julie, what do you think? You worked on your one sentence for what you do. What are your thoughts on it? Because I think one of the things I've noticed with people is that their one sentence gets too detailed, that after a while it's mostly they're speaking to themselves rather than to the other person that they're speaking to.
Yeah, Jay, I actually really love this idea of one sentence as like the core idea. And I think that's what you're driving to. And I'll relate it to a couple of things. One is something I'm working on with somebody, and the second thing is some neuroscience information. So I am working with this woman, and we started off with her asking me to help her with her bio. And we went into this whole explosion of who she is and what she does. And I think that's very important, that when you work on that one sentence, is to kind of open it up before you close it down. Because what I found that with working with this idea of one sentence, which is your hacker speech, is what you're really doing is to find the center of the gravity of things. And then everything else can rotate it. So once you get that one sentence right, you can, it's almost like a prism. You can get infinite number of lights. But I think you're right that the one sentence is the key to get people interested. And so with her, we're actually stuck at figuring out who she is and what's important to her. And the second thing you mentioned in your thing is, like, coach is what you do. So that's doing, that's your action. Winning is the benefit, and speeches is the object, or the act, I'll just call it the object, or the thing you're doing with, right? So I think that in one sentence, in your little 6 words, you manage to say, this is what the action I do with when we relate to each other. Here's the benefits for the relating. And this is the area of focus, my expertise. I actually, to finish that point, I actually am taking an effective business writing class, English business writing class. And the first thing they say is, in the nature of the executive summary, that you want to write no more than 7 sentences, 6 to 7 sentences. So which lets me segue into the idea that this is not recently neuroscience, it's at least 10, 20 years old. Our brain takes like 6 seconds in order to shift something from short-term memory into long-term memory. So by making your sentence 6 words or 7 words long, you're actually taking a slot of time that allows people to not only shift the information from short-term memory into the long-term memory, but also connect the stuff that's in their long-term memory. It's kind of like fishing for things that are important to them and help them to come back to respond to you based on what you're fishing for. They can talk about from their long-term memory maybe why it's so important for them to win, something that's important to them. So in your case, your 3 hooks are coaching, winning, and speeches. So if winning is very important for me, from my long-term memory, by you giving me the 6, 7 seconds, I not only go back into, take your information, shift it into long-term memory, but I can come up with something that resonates or that is attracted to those ideas, and I may say, well, it's very important for me to win. So I think that your idea of one sentence is really, really brilliant. And it works not only, as you say, I use it in identity, but you can use for any unit of, in IT, we have this idea of logical unit of work. It's a logical unit of information that can be transmitted from people to people, that people can understand, absorb, and respond to. So that's what's coming up for me right now. Thanks.
No, that was excellent. There are two things that I want to add that I may have missed when I discussed it. One is that one sentence is not to make the other person know everything, right? It's more for like an engagement, like you said, hooks. Because if the first thing that happens in anything is an engagement, and if you can't get that engagement, then people make decisions very quickly. As you said, our brain doesn't process things. But if you don't come across as engaging, then the other person is not going to give you any more time. And that means that you don't want the opening sentence, the first sentence, to be too complicated. You forget the word complicated. You want it to be simple. Simple in such that there can't be any jargon in there, because jargon is something you understand, the other person doesn't. So you just have to make it clever, make it simple, and get the other person. You're kind of goading the other person to ask you, like, I'm going to tell you, now it's your turn to get me to tell you. And if that person doesn't it's like, catcher pitcher, you just pitched. The other person now has to give it back to you. You just threw the ball to him. What is that person's going to do? Catch it or just whiff it, So it's a way to kind of think about it, because if you miss that chance right from the beginning, then the conversation could veer off in a totally different direction, which is not what you may want to do. And it also kind of tells you whether the other person is worth your spending more time with, because you want to somehow help them. You want to try to explore, like Julie pointed out, like there's a coaching aspect. That's one thing I do. Then there's a concept of winning. That's another angle the person can pursue. And then the third one is speeches. So that's a third path. I created 3 paths that the person can, if that person doesn't pick up any one of them and just says, oh, great, thank you. I mean, that person just ended engagement there. That person told me that I don't want to engage with you because there's nothing there that I find interesting to engage you with. And I made it so simple that if that person can't pick that up, and assuming that I have put in the time working on it, I haven't given them something that says, I am, even if I say I'm a researcher of Higgs boson or whatever that thing is, like somebody can say, whoa, what's Higgs boson? So I'm just giving you an example. So Julie, let's close this out. One other thing is the example, like I always like to use some kind of metaphor. So you remember that movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones is, I think, in Egypt, and he is in a bazaar, and this guy wearing the black outfit takes out this sword, and he's like swinging around, and he's got the whip, and the guy's taking out the sword, and he just takes out a gun and he shoots him. Right? You remember that famous scene, and everybody started cheering. This one sentence is like that gun you're taking out and shooting, rather than impressing people with your sword. So I always like to think of that example, that one sentence is your gun that just fires and gets the other person, achieves your objective. I don't want to deal with the sword play here. This is my one word. I'm going to fire a bullet. Take it. All right, Julie. Why don't we close it out? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think you're onto something. So I would like you to maybe get a workshop together, even if it's just me, and maybe play with that as a segment. I think that'd be cool.
Great, thanks. We can certainly talk about that later on how to make that happen. Okay, so at this point, we'll close this out and take a pause and move on to our next segment.